Hey guys, my name is RyanCentral, welcome to HitScan, and welcome to the game KO. He is Agent 16, the big robot dude, and we're going to go over what he looks like, obviously, as well as his abilities and everything that they do. Quick caveat though, unfortunately no gameplay at this point. At the time of recording, I've just been sent a press kit, the images that you're seeing on screen, as well as the information and dev comments about what this agent is meant to be doing. If you want to see gameplay, maybe a bit of myth busting, if you have any questions on how the agent's going to work, put them in the comments below, subscribe, and keep up to date in the next 24 to 48 hours for all of the content. Speaking of which, the battle pass should have also gone live at the same time as this. If you want to check that video, it's in the description and top comment, unless the embargo's changed. So yeah, that's all of the PSA stuff to do with episode 3. Let's go over KO. KO is a machine of war built for a single purpose, neutralizing radiance. His power to suppress enemy abilities cripples his opponent's capacity to fight back, securing him and his allies the ultimate edge. The main quip, I suppose, of his kit is the suppression tool, which is basically anybody that's caught in the suppression radius cannot use their abilities, they can only use their guns. And that goes over his signature ability, which is 0 point, which is where you equip a suppression blade, the same blade that was in the teasers on the boxes on Breeze. You fire it out and the blade sticks to the first surface it hits, winds up and suppresses anybody in the radius of that explosion. Again, to go over the details on how big the explosions are, how long it takes, we'll do a myth busted video when we can actually test that out. So the suppression is going to be a big talking point overall, just because you lose the ability to use any abilities, and it comes down to raw mechanical aim, which is what the devs wanted and what they'll say later in this video. The second ability is flash drive, which is where you equip a flash grenade and you can throw it, and the flash grenade explodes after a short fuse, blinding anybody in the line of sight. There is a notable mechanic to this. When you right click, you throw a charge flash where it only has to cook for 1 second, as opposed to the normal left click where you kind of yeet it a bit further. That takes 1.6 seconds. So it's basically a flashbang if you right click it, exactly the same as Counter-Strike. And again, that's a theme with this agent, as we'll go over. The C ability is fragment, where you equip an explosive fragment and you throw it, the fragment sticks to the floor and explodes multiple times, dealing nearly lethal damage at the center with each explosion. So again, much more like a molly. Whether that's going to be a problem with the post-plant meta, it's hard to say, but it's just typical utility that you'd expect out of normal tac shooters like Counter-Strike, as well as the suppression stuff. And suppression has a big thing to do with KO's ultimate, which is called Null Command. It says instantly overload with polarized radionite energy that empowers KO and causes large energy pulses to emit from his location. Enemies hit with these pulses are suppressed for a short duration. While overloaded, KO gains a combat stim, and if KO is killed while overloaded, he will be downed and enter a destabilized state, allowing allies to stabilize his core and revive him. There's a lot of stuff data mined to do with being in the down state, and no doubt it has to do with the Null Command ultimate. A few things to break down here. Again, we don't know how long this ultimate lasts, how much time difference is there between each of the pulses. What we do know is he will move around for a set time, kind of like an Empress. Whilst he's moving, he will basically emit this suppression field, basically like a constant EMP for Sombra, but you can still use your guns. He's effectively there to take abilities out the hands of the enemy and just take natural gunfights. I think a lot of those ex-Counter-Strike players, people like Scream, are going to love this guy, just because it's like, I'm just going to win you in a 1v1 duel. Scream isn't as keen on maybe using utility. Uses an ultimate like this, you have to 1v1 Scream with just your gun. That's going to be hard. Same with Tens, but I think Tens is a bit better with his utility, but we don't need to speculate on that too much. So now that's all of the abilities. Again, quickly, 0 point is where you throw the knife hits a wall, it emits a suppression field, and it hits anybody in that field and suppresses them for a set amount of time. Flash drive, which is just a basic flash grenade. Left click, you throw it quite far, has a longer fuse time before it explodes. Right click, you pop flash it, throw it up close, detonates a lot faster. Fragment sounds basically like a molly, but a more exciting way of going about it. And then Null Command, which is the suppression field as you move in around. You might be super slow when you're doing this as well. It's hard to gauge just off of the text. But off the base of that, what do you guys think of it? Like, I'm genuinely curious on what you want to see. So now that we've gone over that, I want to go over what the devs like John Koziski has said, Ryan Kuzat, who was the game designer for KO, and yeah, just what the devs think overall on this agent, because they go into a lot of detail, and I think instead of speculating about what he should be doing and how good and where his weaknesses are, we can just see what the devs are saying. Obviously, as you can imagine, it's not too much visually to go over here, but I still think this is good information, at least to understand what's going on. So I don't want to waffle too much. Let's go over it straight away. What were the goals when designing KO? This comes from John Kaczynski. I'm sorry if I said it horribly. And he says that KO, our goal was to add something that felt familiar to traditional FPS players with the mollies and flashbangs, but had elements that made it uniquely fit within Valorant, and this is represented in a couple of ways. Flash drive and fragment should be bread and butter gameplay for many of you that have been lobbing nades your whole life, with suppression creating moments where gunplay is all people can rely on. KO was the first agent that we started developing after the game launched. Everybody else, they were prepping well before Valorant came out a year ago, and wanted to integrate him into the world a little bit. Now that you see the teasers on Breeze, they were one way we pursued this, and all of you lore-inclined folks have some fun relationships with the roster. Robots are cool, yeah. Ryan, who's personally my favourite dev for obvious reasons, said outside the opportunity goals on the roster to make an agent that felt familiar to traditional FPS players, we kind of wanted to push for some really intuitive and almost back to basics type of input. I think all of the designers here tend to have quite the imagination for mechanics, of being able to add a bit of Valorant spice to the basics felt great to be able to achieve on KO with the addition of suppression. An aspiration we have for KO is that FPS players should take some of the common mastery they have acquired from other games, like throwing grenades, having those lineups that apply them in an intuitive way to access the output of KO's kit. The throwing knife is a really fun story, and I pretty much just thought it would be badass if you could throw a knife into a wall, so luckily everybody bought in and we made it work. He also says he wants people to look at the map more, using the walls, the windows, empty roofs, the lineups, as you can imagine with that kind of kit. The other stuff in here is more just cool stories about the development, but they go into a bit more detail about the downed and suppression states, and I wanted to talk about that real quick because I think it's important. They say with the down state that it was a fun mechanic that they messed about with to see if it would work, and they said after a few tweaks, the down state gave us a big opportunity to give KO the killer robot fantasy, enticing him to hold W, move forward and kill, while creating a unique mid-round objective if he was downed. I can't wait to go more into the nitty-gritty detail of this, but the fact that you have an ultimate that can stop you from not dying, I guess, to an extent, and have somebody be able to revive you is good enough in itself. And maybe we can see an agent like KO be able to shut down some of the oppressive abilities in the game without being too oppressive himself that you need to see him in every game. It's hard to know whether that's going to be the case or not. I guess like with him, and apparently he's an initiator according to the leaks, which I didn't want to talk about yesterday because I think it was only a couple of images, and even then, like, I would have preferred to have gone over everything one big go. You lose out on information. Sky and Silver, if you contend with them, you lose a lot of info to work with. So whilst he's good, you lose out in a lot of big areas too. And yeah, when it comes to suppression, they were thinking of an idea and they were going over stuff with Arcane, who's one of the main devs on Balance. And one of them said, you know, screw abilities, man, I just want to frag. And that's where they got the idea for suppression from, which I thought was pretty funny. Anything else that they would have liked to share was the final question. And John says that we hope you enjoy fragging on Chaos. Super excited to see how you all utilize suppression and stoked to see some clutch revive plays. Thank you for continuing to play Valorant. It's a nice thing to end on. And yeah, the abilities overall seem really cool. It's a nice mix of the very traditional play, and you have to be good with the molly ability and with the flashes in order to find success, but also nailing suppression down. How much of a state it's going to be, whether it's incredibly strong like flashes were in the game, or whether it's like being detained by Killjoy where it's incredibly strong, but the amount of time that you're suppressed or detained in that case isn't as much as you might have thought before you got your hands on it. There is a common trend where people think that Valorant agents are super overpowered, then they come into game and they're not that bad. And the only case of that recently has been Astra, but everything else has been pretty good. So I'll leave it there. That's everything that the devs have said about the new agent and all of the information on how they work. Again, if you want to see the battle pass, everything in there, you can check the other video, but be sure to tune in over the next couple of days to see all of the gameplay. And if you have any myth busting questions, you know, what happens if I use this ability with that ability from Killjoy, those kind of questions, ask me in the comments. I'll be sure to answer all of them in a follow-up video. So thanks again for watching. Episode 3 is going to be amazing, and I'll see you next time.